What are the things you optimize for?
I think earlier in my career, I optimized for money and interest, but now I optimize for interest. Looking back, could have probably put me on a safer financial path. But at the time, what was guiding me was whether I would want to do that particular job or not. So you get all kinds of offers, and after a while, you start to filter for. People will offer you all sorts of things. Somebody's asked me to run an airport, somebody has asked me to run a hotel.
Adia Sowho is a venture builder who designs, builds, and scales tech ventures. She was the first ever female chief marketing officer at MTN, Nigeria's largest telecoms company. Before that, she led growth at Migo and drove digital transformation at Etisalat.
Mindsets are vulnerable, right? And when they're so fixed, they become biased, and you stop seeing opportunity. All I'm saying is, but you do this at a time when there are 300 other companies called with Flix in their name, all streaming. And that's why Netflix never, in my opinion, just never really got too far with their penetration. All the stress in the world is rooted in the word.
Starting off, you've been, describe yourself as someone who builds, and scales tech ventures. And people around you have described you as someone who has like deep insight into a number of issues. I'm curious, how have you always been like this? And what are the factors, the experiences that have shaped you to become like this? I know when you were young, of course, like I don't think you were scaling tech ventures and all of that, but how has that shaped you?
I think to describe oneself, it's a it's a backward looking experience. All right. So I didn't necessarily step forward into it with intention. I mean, it's okay to have a plan or have a thought of where you're going to be or who you're going to be in 5 or 10 years professionally. But the only reason I can make a sentence like that, rebuilding, scaling, tech ventures or whatever, is because I look back and try to make it make sense in one sentence. So it just is the culmination of all of the experience across the different companies from seed stage to listed, right? The ones that were in good shape, the ones that needed a little bit of help, and the ones that yeah. So it's a backward looking thing. So it's not, I think, for anybody thinking about that right now, it's rarely something you can plan. Definitely not for someone like me. I mean, maybe there are some people that can plan it. I guess if you start out in a profession like law, right, you can actually, your trajectory is super clear. But for the rest of us, you can only look back and then try and make sentences like that.
So when you were younger, um what were those fun aspirations that you look back and like, I wanted to do this, but what were your earliest?
Earliest, I don't know. At one point, I wanted to be an architect, and then I think imposter syndrome got the best of me, and I decided I wasn't creative enough. And then I think when I spent a lot of time talking about which engineering discipline I would pick with my dad, because I was good at the sciences. So you know how it is now. You know how our school system works. And then we just eliminated all the rest because I was like, oh, mechanical, chemical, and then electronic was just the one that didn't seem to be so specific that I could find an argument not to do it. So that's the one that got me in the end. Yeah.
In another conversation, I spoke about how you're from Urobo, and it's a very strong alpha, as you called it, right? Because you can't separate that. How does that like play a role?
I mean, we're all a product of our circumstances, right? I'm a product of the home I came from. I have a very close-knit family. I have a very large extended family. Both my parents have a lot of siblings. I have a whole lot of cousins. They were my first friends. They are still my best friends. All right. So and I grew up. I'm a first daughter of a first daughter. You know what I mean? So and my aunts are very sort of strong women. My uncles are strong men. I come from a household full of people that speak their minds. We don't. I think generally Yoruba people are quite forthright. I mean, check your comedy. I mean, we're all over it, right? Um, so yeah, I think I'm simply the child of my ancestors. I really didn't. I mean, I have a lot of respect for rebels because they depart from their norm. I didn't. So I'm simply just who I am from the house I came from. I think anyway. So
Looking at, of course, your career, what are the things you optimize for? Some people optimize for money, some people optimize for like taking risks and all of that. How has that probably evolved?
I think earlier in my career I optimized for money and interest. But now I optimize for interest. So I have passed on opportunities that, looking back, could have probably put me on a safer financial path. But at the time, what was guiding me was whether I would want to do that particular job or not. And if I was able, I would pass on the opportunities to someone else. But I think, after a while, I mean, people will offer you all sorts of things. Somebody's asked me to run an airport. Somebody has asked me to run a hotel. And then you ask yourself, okay, you just kind of, you want to move through what you're good at and sort of stay in your zone of genius, when you know what your genius is, right? So you get all kinds of offers, and after a while, you start to filter for these offers that seem left field to me. And don't get me wrong, those are not the first left field. Some of the offers I've taken have been left field offers, and then you step back and you go and think about it. Maybe call somebody you respect, and those people that have guided me to some of those positions. They know the conversations that we've had where I was like, absolutely not, this is not the right move, and the person is like, calm down, let me tell you why this is the right move, and I've listened. And in many cases, it's paid off because it's shaped who I am. But I will tell you that in some cases, a role has been offered to me, or a role has been presented to me, and I've thought it was crazy, and then somebody helped me see that it wasn't, and yeah, I've ended up taking those jobs.
That's good to hear. You spoke about like staying in your place of genius. I know recently you've also just expressed ideas around how like all activities are not equal, right? They don't give you the same value. I think it was quantified in monetary terms. And I mean, I read it and I was like, this makes sense. I mean, I went to think about my life. I'm like, you know what? You need to, we hear these things a lot about priorities, but just a reminder that, you know what? I mean, if my services or my efforts are better suited to driving bigger outcomes here, then why play here? So I think just to hear you speak on it and maybe how that one shaped you looking at yourself and thinking about it.
So I say a lot of stuff. That particular point, I don't know, was that a tweet or something?
It was the 10K skill.
Yeah, not every task has an equal priority, and I think after a while, it's okay to delegate, especially when you know how to do something, because there are only 24 hours in a day, and no matter what I wear, I'm not getting younger, right? So, and none of us is. We're not. There is a finite amount of time we have to spend on Earth. So if you spend that doing nonsense, like checking email, you know what I mean? It's just after a while, you look back and ask yourself, what did you use your time for? So I do agree that I do sort of get to certain points where, I say, this is the way I'm going to behave. So for instance, now, I've done a lot of panels, right? So I'm at a point now where I'm less keen to do panels. I'm more keen to write, right? But when someone approaches me to do a panel, I have a list of people that I usually refer them to lovingly and say, I'm not available, but however, these are people that can, that are very talented and think can speak on the topic. It's also my way of trying to create opportunities for others, right? And then now I've shifted to writing and maybe doing panels in different arenas. just to again give myself a new challenge and also maybe to reach more people, right? Because at the end of the day, a panel is typically limited to the audience that's in the room at that particular point in time. But I've been doing those for 15 years now in Nigeria, right? So surely, there are, people behind me, men and women, right, that can, that have a point of view on the topic. So I'm more interested now, I think, in maybe even teaching people to find their point of view and sharing it. I mean, mine are not, I don't know everything. I only know what forms my own point of view. And, it's very okay for someone else with a point of view to find their voice and to go and speak. So these days I end up encouraging people to go do panels rather than taking them myself. So again, it's kind of like panels are no longer, at one point they were a 10K task for me, because at that time I needed to find my voice and find the quality of my expression of my ideas within sort of like the business space. But I have that skill now. So for me to continue to stay there is no longer a challenge. So it's not a 10K task anymore. It's more like a 1K task. But the 10K task is teaching people who wonder or want to do it how I started or how to find their own voice. So I'd rather do that.
I'm taking it in. I guess panels, maybe keynotes, or in different cycles, because like you said, Nigeria can be one big bubble, and then we see ourselves every time, and just like,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm
she's
I'm
once
I'm,
again.
I'm hood famous in Nigerian tech, right? So
Yes.
but we have to go elsewhere. We need to do Nigeria to the world.
Talking about like companies and experience, I hope you remember this one. Your perspective on companies either being like number one or number two, right? Where they either lead or follow. We like to say, here you say, I'm the head and not the tail. I'm the leader, but it looks like there are scenarios where you're better off following than leading. And I thought that's because it would seem weird to say once everybody supposedly just like, oh, I want to be the leader in the category, or I want to, right? So just that difference between when companies can or should like look at being first or second.
This perspective is real to me because I've worked for companies that were not number one and were okay with not being number one and found their place in not being number one. Yes. So it is a thing. It is a thing. The first telco I worked for was not it was a top 10 telco. I think it was number 6, right? And they were very okay with that. Also working for Etisalat. Etisalat was not number one. Do you understand? But it was still a compelling telco. But internally, the strategy of both telcos, and the consulting company I work for, who was Deloitte Consulting, was not number one. It wasn't, McKinsey, BCG Bain. It was the group after that. That's when you now call, Deloitte. So being in a series of companies that have that personality and how they react to the market, how they react to opportunity, how they treat new technology, how their organizations are shaped, the fanfare that greets them when they enter an office. You know what I mean? What the reaction to them is. Particularly with the telcos, it was like, okay, in America, US Cellular, the telco I worked for there, when new technology will come out, they'll be like, okay, let Verizon go and test it. When they finished, we'll buy the phase 2. Do you understand? Or the second generation of that technology. Let them make the market, right? Let them spend the marketing money, introduce the market to it, and then we'll jump in and then fill in any quality gaps, right? And then the other thing with number 2 sometimes is when you're, or at least when you're not number 1, is you come in, number 1 already has legacy issues. So then you come in, your organization is more agile, your tech is more sprightly, you are using the latest best practice, where number 1 may be ingrained in some of their habits and not able to change. So it depends on, but then there are definitely a lot of advantages to being number 1. I've seen, so you mentioned MTN. MTN, for instance, is not number 1 in its home market, and it was determined to find markets where it would be number 1, right? Because the benefits are different. So they know what life is like being number 1 and number 2, right? So when you're number 1, you own the market, you shape the market, you determine, how customers describe products, you set the standard, right? So it depends on your internal capabilities as an organization. And then, for the founders in the room, it depends on who the founder is. If you're that person that is creative and you can stay ahead of the pack, you don't borrow ideas, you make them, right? Then you can comfortably step into the market and be number 1. But if you're the person that's like, oh, I see something to optimize, I don't have as much cash, you know what I mean? I don't have the resources for market validation. Then go ahead and be number 2, but be a very good number 2, right? So there's a difference between the head and the tail. Being number two is not the tail. Do you understand? You're just the neck, maybe.
Does it,
I think it works.
yeah, it's neck, but it still doesn't have that. It feels binary sometimes, but it's not binary.
It's actually not binary at all. It's not binary at all. And there are many industries where, you know, the profitability dynamics are very different when you're in tier one versus tier two. What you have to spend on, what your operating costs are very different from when you're in tier one versus tier two. How you get your customers is very different. So these are all the things one should be looking at when you decide whether to be number one or number two.
Well, in this case, are they number two, but they're like content in a sense?
No, not necessarily. You're still stressing number one now. Do you
But
understand?
yes,
But
are
at
you
the same time,
aspiring to be number one,
maybe if you can get there, it depends on whether you stress number one enough.
or the
You know
slack
what I
and
mean? You know what I mean? So then you know, okay, so look at followers have become leaders. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Google was a follower.
Yes.
Google followed Yahoo.
Yes.
Yahoo got, I don't know, tired and retired. Then Google became number one. Now Google is number one. And then OpenAI wakes up and scatters the whole market. Right? So there's nothing wrong with being number two and then eventually moving to number one. It just depends on the competitive landscape. The telco that I used to work for in the US is still in that second tier and still very happy and still very profitable. Do you understand? They are okay. Do you understand? So it really just depends. But I think it's important to just recognize that the dynamics are different, right? And they will shift. You can stay in your positions and everybody will just manage themselves. Or number two can become number one, but then expect somebody to come and chase you and be your number two and give you the stress that you gave the number one that you might have driven out of the market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You spoke about reaching out to customers, of course, the type of customers. And I mean, the example of I guess it's a number one and number two in this context where you have the Coca-Cola doing like the big fancy ads and sponsoring like events. And you have, for example, in the Nigerian context, a biggie, right? So it's just like, come and I just also seeing it everywhere. And I'm like, what's this thing that's being sold? And over time, like it's grown in terms of, I guess, market share, even mind share at least, right? So I think there's something that was something crafted as distribution innovation, where we are thinking of how to get your products like closer to people. That's not something that I think is, because it makes you think out of abandon whatever boxes or frameworks, say, starting from the consumer, how can I get this closer? So just to speak more on this, that example is great. Another one to it, because it might feel a bit far, because some people might not be selling drinks, right? So another example to that will be helpful to drive home the point of like thinking about distribution innovation.
Okay, so I mean, you mentioned Coke and Biggie.
Yes.
That's relevant in this market, but that fight started with Coke and Pepsi globally, right? But then they were both, behaving like number one. They were both like marketing heavy and so on and so forth. But Pepsi at that time had the freedom to do more drastic things in its marketing because it was not number one and did not have to have the comportment of a number one, right? But I'll tell you another company that started out with distribution innovation. It's Starbucks. Okay, so unfortunately we don't have Starbucks in Nigeria, but I'll do my best to give you some background on Starbucks. So they started off, I mean, they made coffee very bougie, gave it all these fancy Italian names, this and that, blah, 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 blah. So we are now speaking the language of Starbucks. But I think Starbucks had a strategy to have a Starbucks within, just basically based on population density. So on one major street in the city, you could see like 3, 4, 5 Starbucks, right? No billboards, just Starbucks. So what that did is if you're on that street, if you're in a bus, in a car, you just keep driving by, you see Starbucks, see Starbucks, see Starbucks. Do you understand? That was one example of distribution that I noticed, much earlier in my career. Now, Starbucks spends a lot more on marketing and on advertising because they are at the top of the market. And then every other week, somebody's opening some artisanal coffee shop trying to be anti-Starbucks. You have Joe's, you have Pete's, you have all sorts of competitors, now. But I think that it's okay to actually sit down and think about, again, based on your expertise, who you are as a founder or operator, where are you going to shine? Are you going to innovate on distribution, or are you going to innovate on marketing? You can actually even make that example here with the telcos. Who is best at distribution? Who has their product most readily available in the market? Which airtime can you find the fastest? At the time when buying airtime was still a physical exchange, right? You lived and died based on your distribution innovation, right? So then in the telco, at least I remember at Etisalat at one point, we did an exercise that calculated the average distance between every human being in Nigeria and an Etisalat retail outlet. And then we now checked how often did they stock out. Right. So eventually this became like how often did they run out of stock?
Of the
So this is why analytics is king, right? And you see me also talking about metrics a lot, right? Because you have you you have to actually know how to design the metric to look at in your business to know what's working or not. So yeah, I think there's room for marketing and innovation, but marketing is so much harder now and harder in unstructured markets like ours, because it's not like how many people have DSTV. It's 1% of our population, less than 5. Do you understand? So you can't buy, unless you are sponsoring Premier League, which, for instance, but even Premier League, you still have less than half of Nigeria watching the Premier League for the whole season. Do you understand? So we don't necessarily have consolidated marketing channels like some developed markets. Do you understand? You can't go to one place and buy a radio campaign that crosses the country. You have to work with an agency. Then the agency now works very hard to go regionally, independently, right? And then you cobble together a national campaign. To run a national campaign in markets like ours is extremely hard, right? Which is why marketing now becomes so expensive. Okay. But then distribution, as counterintuitive as it might seem, might even be easier, right? So as long as your product is there, the day the customer needs it, it's best to just, So I would encourage us to think about both at least equally. Okay. I mean, I'm a former CMO, so I can never tell you not to consider marketing, right? But distribution itself, right, is also important.
Yes. I saw a tweet from someone who used to work at Nigerian breweries and spoke about like providing ice blocks to the people that sold them to make sure that there's a cold bottle of Coke so people can buy, right? In that case, he's thinking what people want beyond even the drinks available, making sure that they are cold. So yeah, but then you're right, like it's not one of either. It's just looking at all the factors that make you work.
Even pure water. Do you understand? Like,
Yeah, that's it. But I'm to stretch this a bit. I'm looking at this in the context of, because I feel like we've spoken about physical goods. I'm trying to, okay, for someone that sells something that is not, pardon me, tangible, right? A service, right? How could that play out, right? I mean, just top of mind example.
do you have any vendor that sends you like a happy new month message? Maybe your tailor.
Some of them do that.
Don't worry, for the women that are watching you, your makeup person probably says happy new month. You know what I mean? Like so these are, ways to sort of drive engagement and keep the conversation alive, right? So I think when you have a digital product and you have a customer journey, there are going to be particular touch points where you engage with the customer and the customer has to respond. All right, what you do at that particular point in time is maybe you surface an opportunity. You know what I mean? It's almost like, ordering something from a food delivery app and you've forgotten drinks and you get to check out and you're like, hey, by the way, you need something to drink with this lovely meal you've ordered. Do you want to just add it to your cart? Do you understand? So again, it's meeting the customer at the point of need when they have their hand in their wallet and they're about to bring it out to pay virtually. All right. And then you just kind of, use that opportunity and just sort of like maybe either upsell, cross-sell, whatever. But I think with digital products, there is a conversation from the time the customer opens the app, signing up, blah, 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 blah. There are lots of places where you talk to the customer.
Yeah.
Or you can just sort of, activate a sales conversation somewhere, even if it's a service. Do you understand?
Yeah. All right. Now I think about, well, all my banks send me happy birthday, my birthday. Right. They
Do you
don't offer me
understand?
anything, but they send me happy
Mm.
birthday.
Well, they probably offer you
Yeah.
loans.
Well, that's not what
There
I'm
you
looking
go.
for.
So that right. So offering the right thing at the right time, that's a whole other skill set. Do you understand? But I think they've started. They are trying. They're offering what they want you to buy.
Yes.
They are not really offering you. In your
What do
case,
I
what
even want? That's the thing. Now I think about it,
that's what they
something to think
want.
about.
The what where
Yeah.
they where you now see some brilliance is where you are offered what you want.
Yeah. That would
You
be
do understand
nice.
that's when you get to a sweet spot, and then you now see better conversions, because what will happen now is that if you're measuring conversions on that customer journey, you'll be seeing, oh, I'm surfacing all these things to the customer and I only see 0.001 click rate. Why? Because you are giving the customer what you think they want. You haven't actually given the customer what they want. If they surface a bonus on airtime at that particular point in time, that's a different issue. Do you understand?
Yeah, true. Talking about like offering the right product at the right time. An example, there are a number of examples where you have a lot of foreign companies that come in with a particular model offering a particular product, right? And then people are like, an example, Netflix, right? I mean, I think the train of thoughts, like in the article you wrote, I was thinking about it, I was like, top of mind was, wouldn't this cause like what you got now, some pushback in the West? Because when you have someone offering like a different thing, and like, why don't we should have that too? Uniformity feels safe because it's like, oh, that's what we're offering everywhere, right? But just to talk on like the idea of offering, because I never really thought the fact that, oh yeah, like I don't need to pay per month, in terms of subscription, and then even how to go about paying it and all of that. I think it was just like, okay, you mean this thing can be tweaked, right? So I think that's something to, because there are, I guess, opportunity costs and, if I can call it, risks to consider when you offer something different. Sometimes people complain that this is cheaper in this market, and people sometimes try to use VPN to get around. So, I mean, how would you like think about that? Because when I thought that, I was thinking of the downside, or like, I won't call it downside, but the other consideration for the business in terms of meeting your customers at the point of their need. Am I thinking too much for them, or is it being taught wrongly in terms of trying to shape product experience per market, in a sense, as opposed to just bringing what's in the US?
So the product experience is really not that different if you go from monthly to weekly or daily. It's the same Netflix you get when you sign in. All right. So what are we really thinking about? I think what you started this question with was a notion that a product must be exactly the same everywhere it is presented. Right? I think that when you say that in a company, you're like, oh, okay, we'll change the language. Do you understand? Maybe we'll put people that look like the people locally. Do you understand? So instead of using Oyibo people or East African looking people, we'll use West African looking people. Right? But that's just surface stuff. I think it's okay to go a little bit, to get into the context a little bit, right? And I think that mindsets are vulnerable, right? And when they're so fixed, they become bias, and you stop seeing opportunity. All I'm saying is it's okay to ask a question. Keep the product the same, just figure out a few more pricing plans. Right? So that was something that we said quite a lot to other parties that wanted to do streaming. Right? And there was a short-lived partnership between Amazon and MTN where we experimented with all of that, right? So there were weekly plans, I think. There were definitely
Prime
weekly
or Amazon?
Prime, yeah, Amazon Prime,
Video,
yeah.
sorry.
Prime
Yes,
Video, yeah. So I think there were weekly plans, maybe weekend plans. I can't remember now. But then another interesting thing that was done with that project was there were mobile plans, there were TV plans, and there were mobile plus TV plans. Okay, so you see the difference, right? So if you can say the pressure on the servers, the data being transmitted to a mobile phone is less voluminous than the data being transmitted to a television. Why are they paying the same price in a market where the ability to pay is more challenging, right? So Amazon, these things, they take time, because like you said, it appears less risky to take exactly the same model as it is where it worked and not change anything, and then go somewhere else where the people are completely different and give them the same thing, right? But you do this at a time when there are 300 other companies called with Flix in their name, all streaming, right? This was about 10 years ago when I was dealing with these guys. I started dealing with these guys. I mean, every other meeting I had was somebody called Flix wanting to do something. And all of them wanted to disrupt Netflix. They're like, "Ugh." And that's why Netflix never, in my opinion, just never really got too far with their penetration numbers. I think they just had a few steps to take. But to be honest, day to day, America is probably still their biggest market. So you can't really blame them. They cannot contort themselves, for the sake of smaller markets like ours, or different markets like ours. It's just not a priority because they were trying to stay alive over there, right? Because remember, Netflix was a challenger. They were number whatever, right? And then they started taking out their competition. So I was in America when Blockbuster was sniffing at Netflix, and Netflix offered themselves to Blockbuster and said, "Please buy us." Blockbuster said, "No. What are we using you for?" Oh, is Blockbuster not dead now? Blockbuster is just nostalgia now, right? But then, so Netflix, after sort of like challenging and moving past Blockbuster, now started to challenge all the more big established studios when they set up their own studio as well. So they were fighting for their life. They can't really, start worrying about these types of things that at the time did not seem like the type of things you should worry about. But the reason I talk about these things is that I want product managers to start thinking about these things so that they are not a lower priority when you are thinking about expansion. You know what I mean? Like for us on the continent, what does that mean? Like Nigeria, mobile money is picking up, but you have cash and you have cards. Even if you want to expand elsewhere in Africa, you need to be prepared to consider mobile money as a payment option. If you enter another market and say, "I only take cash or cards," where is that going to leave you? In a market like Kenya or in a market like Ghana? Nowhere. So I'm not necessarily saying this for foreign companies, just for foreign companies coming in. It's for us as we go out, right? You've built a product with pay as you go, and then you go to America where they cannot, they don't do pay as you go. Are you structured to collect cards? Are you partnered with Visa or Master? Like, what payments are you using now? There are companies like Stripe that make all this, easy now. You don't have to think about it, right? But then how do you even price a subscription? What does that, operational cost look like for you? You know what I mean? So these are things that we too have to think about as we expand to other markets. So it's not a unidirectional
Yeah.
thing.
Either way, it's just
You have to go beyond what we call localization or change the brand colors. You know what I mean? Remember when Cardi B came and she wore green, or John Legend came and wore green and white? You know what I mean? It has to go, and we do that with products a lot. You just change the color and think you've localized, right? But there's so much more to do, right? And experience. And even my two examples remain good, right? Because John Legend went and visited a bunch of artists and studios because that's what he was interested in, right? Cardi B also went to people she considers artists and studios in SF, right? So she got to know Nigeria. They each got to know Nigeria, with some context, right? You know, and when you do that, then you start to recognize, how your empathy needs to shift to recognize, to just see what their realities are, what their wins are, what their challenges are, right?
that's true. Uh, product managers, you mentioned talking about like priorities, metrics. I know it extends beyond that, but when companies have like priorities, in order to achieve it, they need to make sure that they're tracking the right thing. And of course, we hear it every okay. I think it's still a thing. The OKR era. So many. I'm sure in a few years' time, something new will come, captivate everybody.
Sure.
But I think beyond that, the fact that it can be actionable, right, was something that stands out, right? The fact that something that responds, that you can respond to, and I think that's something that, of course, we did talk about like it's been. It'd be nice if it could be automated, if it could be instant. Automated is why here, right? But I think for me, it would just be nice. So I have some context, but it'd be nice to flesh that out, like for people to better understand. And then just with a few examples to see how, because I think it's got me thinking, okay, could there be a way? Because it's like, if there can be an automated system where the person, you don't even need to be saying, hey, you haven't done this. Like the person already knows. We don't have to have a long meeting where everybody is saying what they want to say, and it's just there for people to see. Right. So, and well, I don't know that there's one, I could be wrong, one solution that does that, but I think it's just be helpful to hear that train of thoughts and see how.
There are so many
Oh,
solutions
there
that
are.
do that. There are. But I think, the solution will respond to the demand of the organization. Do you understand? That's when metrics will get emailed out if you get a solution that has the email capability and you use it. Right. So the capabilities are there. Right. And that's why I was trying to speak to the thinking. So you've kind of touched on, other things I'm going to write about metrics. I took a break this week. By the time this goes out, there'll
No, you would have
be
written about it.
all
Don't
right.
worry.
So um beyond just even automating the metrics. So okay, let me even take a step back. So in a telco, there are certain things that are reported hourly. You know what I mean? Some things are even reported by the minute. So again, I'm used to sort of being in a data rich environment, but I think that doesn't need to be limited to a telco. But beyond just the data being there, it has to be used in the right way, by the right person, right, so that they have the right reaction to the problem at hand. But even in a telco, there is a way the metrics can just be there, and they'll be on one dashboard that confuses everybody, and nobody is using them. I think where this thing gets really powerful is when metrics. Okay, so there's like, we're gonna get a little bit geeky here for a second, right? So you have metrics that just tell you what happened. So for instance, how much money did I make yesterday? Okay, now if you expected to make 100 and then you made 80, what will now happen? Somebody will call a meeting and then say, okay, why? Right? What you also want is the situation where your metrics are telling you, okay, we made 80 because, do you understand? So then what does that do? That eliminates that first meeting. Okay, or at least eliminates the first 15 minutes where you're talking about that stuff in that meeting. Right? And then you want to go from there to, okay, since we made 80 on Tuesday, we have to make 120 on Thursday for us to make 1,000 in 10 days. Do you understand? Because then all of us have goals, right? So you now want the metrics to be forward looking and telling you how this affects the goal that you've promised your shareholders, or the goal that you expect from your team.
Yeah.
Right? But then, you can still move beyond that. You can actually get to a point where you are like, okay, there's this thing, it has been raining every Tuesday, right? Which means we won't be able to sell as much on Tuesdays. So let's maybe do a campaign on Monday to drive sales, okay, for whatever reason, right? So we make up for that dip on Tuesday, do a different campaign on Wednesday to make up for that dip on Tuesday, so that we don't keep coming back to deal with this issue. Do you see there's an evolution here beyond how much did we make? You understand? So you can actually start to change the questions that you ask, right? To go further and further and further into the issues that lead to that number coming out, right? And then cannot put solutions in place. And at the end of the day, if you've been able to do all of that, then you cannot let AI take over and actually just start creating your Monday campaigns and your Wednesday campaigns. Or if all of a sudden Thursday now starts acting mad, then do you understand? So there's so much more that metrics can do. It really, really comes down to just really being thoughtful about the kind of business you have, really being thoughtful about what goes into the number you're looking at, and then stepping back into the future. I mean, this is how Amazon does what it does. It's numbers. It's not fortune telling or luck. It's actually numbers, right? Like I was reading the other day that Amazon patented a process for predictive ordering. For them to do that, and they literally did. If you order toilet roll, the toilet roll will just be in your area. Do you understand? So that the day you order it, they're bringing it to your house that day, right? But they would have done this by looking at, when do people typically, order tissue? Do they do it once with their bulk shopping, Or when they forget, do they now pay extra so that the tissue comes quickly? So how can we now make this easier for customers? So I'm still looking into it. I'm looking for the patent document to just even understand, how they got there. But it's data. It's not the companies that are at the front of any industry, technology driven, data rich industry that you're looking at are there because they are looking at the data in the most predictive and prescriptive way.
Hmm. Thinking of how it's I mean it makes a lot of sense. I think the work is now how to take it and implement for
So I
any.
think just start with the one we've talked about so far. You know what I mean? It's like just on the Substack, right? Just take the metric you look at it, and can somebody take an action based on it? If the answer is no, right, then you need to change the metric. And first of all, make it actionable. Then it's a journey. It's a journey. I didn't start speaking this language overnight. There's a lot of like time experience. I've had teams that were very metric savvy, and I know what that did for my mental health, right? Because I didn't have to chase them. I'd come into the office and be like, oh, I saw the number, and they will finish oh, we fixed it. Who doesn't want that kind of soft life? Do you understand? But then I've been there where you have to go and meet the team and be like, this is a table, this is a graph. This, when it goes like this, it means up. When it's like this, it means down. This is where you need to be doing something. So again, analytics is actually scary for a lot of people. So you can use a different approach to metrics to make it more approachable.
Yeah, sure. Good. We've spoken a lot about what you write, what you've written. Let's go back. Let's take a step back to what you even read. Right. I know that people people have different preferences, but I would start with reading. Right. You can let me know if you're more of a listener or something. They're notable because all this English and grammar is from.
I have been accused of being an English speaker, yes.
So, what are like? I mean, one or two like I guess top like books. I know there's endless top of mind that you've read, or just more in recent time. To be fair, like something you've come across that are like, oh, this is good, or maybe it's the one you're right.
Maybe it's that one, yeah. Yeah, I am writing, but more on that soon. Maybe you'll have me back when I'm ready to talk about a book.
I just coincidence. I just
Okay, my reading pattern is very random. So I read a lot in short bursts. So I have a bunch of newsletters that I sign up for, and they cut across many different things. I was just telling my friend that I have an app for everything, right? So I geek out on productivity. If I can do something faster, I'm doing it. Like immediately I can, I'm doing it. Like one of the things I've been playing around and even joking with someone else is how much of our lives can we automate, right? Just the things I do. If I'm doing it 3 times, I immediately start looking for how to automate it, right? So I read a lot of, and the technology is there right now to do that, right? So
it'd be nice to see the apps on your phone. That would be
yeah,
interesting.
some of them are in my phone. Anyway, so there are a bunch of newsletters that sort of feed that part of me. Um, uh, I'm trying not to read. I'm trying to read a lot of fiction right now. Because I don't want to think about work. I'm on sabbatical, so I'm not. I'm trying not to be in that sort of work headspace. I do read business books. I don't really read biographies, to be honest. I don't know. I just don't. I don't know why I don't find like I think there are other ways to get to know human beings. I don't know if reading about them in a book. It's also the reason why people ask me why I haven't written one. I'm like, for what? Who wants to read my biography? But that's I don't know. We're not getting into that. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I don't really read biographies too much. Um yeah, so I do try to read a lot of fiction. I read on the internet a lot. So like I will bookmark articles. I have read later apps. I have like a whole sophisticated, save what I highlight type of situation. Yeah. So like that's a whole other thing. But once in a while I'll pick up a business book and read it. But it's not easy to get through books these days. There's so much, stealing our attention. Like I was reading a book about Jay-Z this morning, but just even getting through the pages was tough. I kept, okay, should I change the music? Let me check my email. Blah, blah, blah. So it's just, and I know there are people watching this that can relate. So the struggle is real.
Is that like a you thing too? Because I mean, I'm hearing you say, because some people would, oh, I want to read, so I put my phone on mute, right? So I'm not getting notifications, right? But then, like, maybe there's, I mean, processing, maybe there's a lot of information you're processing that more people, typically, some people wouldn't. Like, music, it just feels like it's something in the background and you're not
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
Is that like a you thing, or do you feel like
No,
it's
it's actually a big problem. You probably don't know you're doing it, right? So, I mean, the minute you're listening to music where somebody is saying words, you're going to be distracted by that music. There's no way. You know what I mean? You can say it's in the background, but the minute you hear the song on the album you don't like, you go and skip it. Then you're distracted, right? So, yeah.
Except that's why sometimes we defer to like those long on. I mean, for me on YouTube.
Yeah, the
like,
lo-fi ones. Yeah. Exactly. There's no voices, right? So that's when that works. So there's a difference between when you're listening to, Ashake and saying you want to work, and versus lo-fi, where it's just, that's why that music is designed for concentration, right? So but you have to decide. I mean, my phone hasn't rung out in years. I have notifications turned off for the most part. But then what's worse is that somebody has sent a message. So without the notification, I go and check, right? So anyway, well, these are all. I've just got an app that will start shutting down my phone, even during the day.
do you need like the what's that thing? Screen time. Screen
No,
time is not
I
enough.
get past screen time quickly. Like it's automatic now. Like I know exactly. I can do it with my eyes closed. It's not even hard. Yeah. So I need something a little bit more, strict.
Wow, that's
Oh, you didn't think I had these struggles?
no, not. I'm just well. I mean, needing something stronger than screen time is, but then I agree. Like screen time is not like you just say.
Exactly.
When it's getting more, just say 24 hours. Just leave me alone.
Exactly. That's it. Exactly. Screen time is weak. You need something more. Like look at your life goals. Which one are you neglecting? Stop it. You know what I mean?
Oh, interesting. What app is that?
The one I've just started using is Freedom. I tried one called One Sec, which is very interesting. So like I'm sure what we're people are vibe coding things now, right? But this was pre-vibe code era. But this guy just sat down and decided to create a SaaS. I've been observing this no code movement where people just carry laptop, go to Bali, and then just start creating apps. Anyway, this kid on Twitter launches this app called One Sec, and basically you download it on your phone. You select a bunch of apps. So when you go and open, distracting apps, it'll say, okay, let's take a second. Do you really want to open this app? Take a deep breath. Think about it. If after taking this deep breath, you
What?
want to go back to this app, then you can go.
Screen time.
And I find that to be a little bit more effective. If it was too effective, I deleted the app because I preferred my. It's actually too effective. So maybe after talking to you, I'll go download the app again. But yeah, it was a very interesting app.
Oh, that's good. You're pretty much plugged in. I mean, because I mean, have you tried any of? Because you just spoke about like vibe coding, right? Because I know that you're very. Because I saw your. I mean, on one of the schools, I saw the prompts, right? There's a prompt, the one comparing traits. I was like, this is a good prompt. Like, it's such a you're an expert at this, and I'm like, okay, this person did not just.
Yeah. So what I do sometimes, at least the last 2 or 3 Decembers, get a block of time off, and I pick a what I think will be a new keystone skill. So it's a skill that will probably have it will shift my productivity. So I think it was 3 years ago, as soon as ChatGPT came out. I think ChatGPT came out in like, at least I heard about it in like October. That December, I just sat down and I just played with it and learned how to engineer prompts. Right. So I mean, for me now it's second nature, but I think prompting has also become a lot easier. It's not as, you don't have to feed the AI as much context to get a really good answer as before. But yeah. So I did go and learn how to prompt. I am learning to vibe code. I've done one or two things. I've
Ooh.
met some coders I know are not too happy with me. They're like, "Can't leave this thing," but
Okay, you should give them.
no,
to do.
no. When they annoy me, I need to be able to just tension them a little bit with small vibe coding.
Should collect your
Do you
money.
understand? No. You see, it's the ones that collect your money and disappoint you that are the problem. So they need to go and fix those ones. If they fix those ones, then you won't find agbayas like me vibe coding. And we are many. We are actually many.
Oh, really? So we'll soon see something. Playfully, of course, but
Yeah, I was joking with Ngozi the other. He's far ahead of me. He's vibe coding for Africa. Like honestly, so it's no, but taking that a little bit seriously, it creates a fantastic opportunity for us rather than sit down and spend dollars on software to the extent that you can create in-house, right? And empower your teams differently. So I think a lot of people are scared of AI, but there was one day they called an airplane, and they called an airplane witchcraft, right? Or an escalator was witchcraft one day, right? But it's all just technology. So I've seen this, mania around these things and this fear before. I mean, with 5G, should people were saying it is the mark of the devil. I mean, whatever, right?
was an error.
So yeah, it was an error, right? But you move past this and then you enjoy the faster internet, like that's how life started. You get so I've seen these types of things come before, and it's a very normal and specific reaction to technological improvement. But there's always an upside. I generally just spend more time looking for the upside.
How do you how do you define success now, and how has that evolved? Right. I mean, I know now you say you want to help people find their voices. That was just an example. But then how do you how has that evolved? And you're not looking for as much money as you were when you started your career.
Don't say that, you please. The way this naira is set up. No, I think is one happy, and what are the things that make you happy? Are the right things making you happy, and do you have those things? Of course, you're never rich enough, you're never skinny enough, you're never, healthy enough. But if someone asks you today, are you happy? Is your life full of love? Do you have anything to be grateful for? Do you have anything to smile about? If you can answer that in the affirmative, then in any way, shape, or form, then I think you're doing okay. I think all the stress in the world is rooted in the word should. And that's a word I took out of my vocabulary a long time ago, in the bid to just sort of get rid of that stress. You know what I mean? It's one of those words that activates covetousness, which, if you are a Christian, is sinful. You know what I mean? So just when you stay away from it and just, take one day at a time and just have some acceptance and just, you have more joy in your life. So I mean, I can say that, it might be my age and experience talking. If you have a giddy and you want to go for it, no problem. God bless you. But for me, I have a lot of things to smile about in my life. Am I satisfied with everything? Absolutely not. Am I worried about things? Are there things that keep me awake? Of course there are. But I can't let that define me, because otherwise you just drop dead because of the stress prematurely, you know. So
That's
I don't know. I know that's a bit of a meta
yes,
answer
given
to your
you've
question.
transcended, you've been to levels that
Hey,
mental health and all of that. Therapy. Is that I'm curious, is that something from like experience and learning, or you've also just how people you learn these things through being exposed, or you go through like therapy and conversations?
All of that, and then you sit down and listen to God in silence. Just be quiet. Do you understand? I think quiet. There's noisy reflection, and that has its place, and we do a lot of that. But there's also quiet reflection as well, and just that communion, with your maker, and of course conversations, and then everything then becomes a source of inspiration. Whether it's prayer, whether it's therapy, whether it's talking to friends, whether it's crying every once in a while. Right? All of that just informs, but just reflection is I think the most important part of keeping your spirit healthy.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions. I'll take it in. Quietness. You have to go and reflect now. Thank you so much for
Most
taking our
welcome,
time.
Daniel.
Thank you.
All right.